Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast. I'm back with another NFL debate. Now, this debate is very difficult for most. It's pretty simple for me, but for most, it's very difficult just because of the closeness of characteristics of both of these players. Now, when you talk about NFL great tight ends, you think about the Shannon Sharps, you think about the Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez, Ozzie Newsome, people in those realms. So, but this debate is about two specifically. Now, Rob Gronkowski, who spent most of his career with the New England Patriots and later on Tampa Bay, and Travis Kelce, who spent all of his career with Kansas City Chiefs. Now, it's kind of rare that two Hall of Fame or two potential Hall of Fame players in the same position, especially the tight end position, will be, play for the same team or the same franchise. And, specifically, Travis Kelce and Antonio Gonzalez. Now, there can be a debate that Tony Gonzalez is probably more productive than any other tight end in NFL history. He put up a lot of yardage. I want to say he put up 15,000 receiving yards, which is not too far from Jerry Rice's 22,000 when you think about it, especially playing the position he played in a time frame that he played in that wasn't, it was primarily about defense and running the football. But Tony Gonzalez definitely is in this debate, but I'm narrowing this debate down just specifically to Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce. Now, both played their careers with Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Now, Rob Gronkowski had Tom Brady, and then Travis Kelce had Patrick Mahomes, who is projected to be a Hall of Famer and it should be a no-brainer eventually one day. So they both had the benefit of that. Now, when you think about coaches, they both had Hall of Fame coaches for the majority of the career as well. So Rob Gronkowski had, Bill Belichick, and Travis Kelce had Andy Reid. Both great offensive. Well, Bill Belichick is a great defensive mind, and not Rob Gronkowski, but Andy Reid is a great offensive mind. So they made their niche on both sides of the football, but nevertheless, they had great offenses in their repertoire as well. So my thought is, what is the deciding factor in the best tight end debate? So, in my thinking, it has to be more about stats because Tom Brady played Rob Gronkowski played in Tom Brady's offense, which limited his production because they did a lot of different things because Bill Belichick, was controlling the team and pretty much had a stronghold over the offense and everything on the team. So some games they would run the football 40 times and sometimes they would throw the football 40 times. So it all depends. No matter how dominant you are, they weren't going to force feed anybody. So I believe Rob Gronkowski didn't get the stats that he wanted. And plus he had a lot of injuries, a lot of lower leg injuries and back injuries and things like that. So it limited his production. Now, when I'm talking about greatest of all time, I want to say the most who just played the position better all around. So when you think about Gronkowski, he was a dominant catcher of the football, but he wasn't always going to get catches, even though he was primarily the offense as far as passing goes. They had Randy Moss for a couple of years, but I think that was before he even got there. So they never really had a number one receiver. They had Antonio Brown, I want to say, for one game, but they never had a dominant pass catcher. Now, when Rob Gronkowski went to Tampa Bay, they had catchers galore. They had Godwin and they had Mike Evans and they had Antonio Brown. So they had a lot of, weapons to work with. But Kelce has played in Andy Reid's offense, which is a pass-heavy offense, primarily run a pass. They barely run it. Every time they lost the Super Bowl, it's because they didn't run the football and people were able to tee off on Pat Mahomes. So that's the distinction there. I mean, Kelce had Tyreek Hill, who we had to compete with catches, but Travis Kelce was the safety blanket. So if a pass rush came, he would dump it underneath to Travis Kelce, and they would be able to get yards, and he would get more receptions and more looks. And plus, Kelce is very agile, especially for being the size that he is, and he was able to get open. Unlike Gronkowski, Gronkowski was always open just because he could box players out like a center or a power forward. He just had a lot of basketball skills to him. Kelce has basketball skills as well as far as shiftiness, but I think Gronkowski it was just unfair at times. Brady would just throw it up and he would catch it no matter who was on him. He just had that ability. That catch radius was crazy. But you know, for my bang for my buck, I want to say on the tight end position, I would say Rob Gronkowski, just because not only was he a good catcher of the football, and he can run routes to a degree. He wasn't the route runner that Kelce was, but he was also a good blocker, and he had to be a good blocker in that offense. To play in Tom Brady's offense, you have to block. Everyone has to block, especially from the tight end position, because a lot of times the way the plays that they ran and pushing the ball downfield, especially when they got down to Bruce Arians' offense, he had to hold up pass blocking and then go out and run routes. But that was just Tom Brady's style. So I believe Kelsey is not he's not near the good of a good blocker as Rob Gronkowski is. And a huge part of the tight end position that people don't realize is blocking, because you have to be able to block or at least chip those defensive ends. They're very skilled, very physical, and Rob Gronkowski was able to compete with those defensive ends and linebackers. Now, Kelsey, on the other hand, I've seen him get flipped over by Von Miller. I've seen him get flipped over by what's the other guy's name? Von Miller. It was another guy as well, but it was just he just didn't care too much for blocking. He was more a finesse guy. Rob Gronkowski is more the guy that's going to get to do the dirty work. He's not going to complain about targets or missing, not getting a target or not getting enough attempts and things like that. He's more of a team player, I think, than Kelsey is. And Gronkowski wasn't the fastest, but for some reason he just always could either get open or make the catch. So it's definitely an advantage, because when your skill set declines as far as speed and agility, just being able to get open somehow helps you. And Kelsey, later in his career, he looks a lot, like he's retired and he's finished. Rob Gronkowski, I think he retired before he got to that. He still was able to catch touchdowns, especially in the red zone. Everybody know he was getting the football, and he still was catching it. So, uh, if Gronkowski, especially if he didn't have an injury history, he would have had a lot more yardage. And he still has more touchdowns than Kelsey, even though Kelsey has more yardage. But that just shows you the productivity of Rob Gronkowski. But that's my pick between Rob Gronkowski and Kelsey. I got Rob Gronkowski all day. But as always, until the next time, I'll see you next time.